Monthly repayments on newly issued mortgages have increased significantly, haven't they? It's so tough for people. Liz Truss's budget, a lot of people talk about Liz Truss's budget. The jump in interest rates that followed that continued, it is argued, to trigger a collapse in demand for new home loans, and analysts have blamed the mini budget for the fall in demand for new mortgages to fund house purchases and a dive in the number of households refinancing loans, while the prospects for the property market remain uncertain and indeed gloomy and indeed grim for many people. Sally Mitchell, mortgage advisor, broker. Hello, Sally.
Hi there.
So how's his mortgage gone up from 800 to 2,000? This Minister George Freeman, who says on 118,000 he can't afford it. That's quite a rise, isn't it?
It really is, but it's not unusual. We do see that, obviously, depending on how much you have on the loan, you can easily see your monthly payment double at the moment. And there's a lot of people this is happening to. Obviously, he's in a very privileged position with his salary, but on a sliding scale, people at the much lower end of salaries are finding exactly the same percentage increase. It's really tough.
It's a massive chunk up out of what people are making, isn't it? And
it is.
If he can't afford it, goodness me, what about many of our listeners?
Well, exactly. And there's been a investigation between HSBC and Shelter at the moment, just about what sort of impact, mental and emotional impact this is having on people. And they're saying that 40% of adults polled said that they fear their housing situation and costs will get worse in 2024. Now, in 2023, 6.3 million people said that they were struggling with their mortgage payments or rent. So if we think it's going to get worse this year for people, it's a pretty grim picture. It really is.
Aren't things moving in the other direction slowly?
Yes. I would like to have a little chink of light at the end of this, because we have seen rates decreasing since before Christmas. And in fact, this month they are continuing to move in the right direction. Unfortunately, it means that for the 1.6 million who are coming off fixed rate mortgages this year, they will still see an increase, perhaps from between 1% and 2% where they fixed a few years ago to now more likely 4.8, which is better than it was this time, 6 months ago, last year, when we were looking at perhaps 6.5%. So it is going in the right direction, but it still means an increase for most.
Thank you for being there. Here's Sarah in Candle. Here's Ben in Worthing. Good morning, Ben. Sarah, how are you? What would you like to say? What do you make about the Minister's comments?
Well, I was outraged, I have to say, because I said to your researcher,
did you?
My children and myself, our combined income is less than Mr. George Freeman's income. Mm-hmm. Their mortgages have all gone up the back end of last year, yet they are managing to pay it with difficulty, but they make cuts elsewhere to pay for their mortgages. And I just wonder how the rest of us are going to live if Mr. Freeman can't manage.
This is it. Yeah, Ben, what do you think?
Well, I was saying to your researcher, I'd sort of like to understand how he managed to get such a big jump, although your guest that you introduced, the expert, she was saying that maybe it's not uncommon, but it just seems surprising to me because having recently renegotiated various parts of our mortgage, and while I did see some increases, recently I was able to re-agree a rate I'd booked because the rates had been going down. So it sounds like he perhaps should have shopped around a bit, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly a very intelligent man. That's right, but he should have been quite cute about this and made a few phone calls, looked at a few websites. I don't know. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think the metrics of it, of him being a Conservative minister, and he is on a significant salary, and perhaps as an intelligent person maybe thought that this wouldn't have have a lot of people feeling very sympathetic for him. While I don't think that ministers and MPs are overpaid per se, because they're doing a very important job, and so it sort of merits a high salary. Perhaps he could have stepped away, but maybe done it a bit more discreetly, or some
maybe
other
he's making a point.
Reason,
maybe he's beautifully teeing up a phone in by saying this. Look, I'm struggling. So what about everyone else? How's it going to be for everyone else? I'm on 118,000 as well. To be fair to him, he's a One Nation Tory. To be fair to him, he was no great fan of Liz Truss either, in case anyone's saying, well, he supported Liz Truss and how are you doing it? So that, that's not something that can be levelled at him. But how might this have happened, Sally? Ben's very astute point about, let's look at the figures, 800 to 2 grand. And anyone else, get in touch and tell us about how you have been affected by the rise in your mortgage. And as Sarah in Kendal said there, her family making cuts in other areas so they can pay their mortgage. So if you've had to do that, tell us about that. Sally, 800 to 2 grand, what's going on?
Yeah, well, it could be as simple as his age. I don't want to shame him, but I believe he's 56. So most lenders... Well, it depends which side of 56 you're sitting on, to be honest. He's a young pup. But most lenders will look up to your retirement age. Now, his state retirement age, 67. So if we're looking at a rather large mortgage over literally 10 years term, that is going to really affect your monthly payment. The shorter the term you pay it off over, the higher the monthly payment. So it might be that. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, but he might have
maybe the mortgage provider looked at the opinion polls as well.
Maybe. I know he's got other outgoings. He has an ex-wife, he has maintenance, he has child support. So, there's an awful lot that
You've done your research.
I have. I want him as a client.
He's a clever guy. Interviewed him. He's a very, very intelligent and thoughtful man. Is George Freeman.
I think you're right. He wants a phone in.
he's got it. So what about those people coming to the end of their fixed rates? What's it like for them, Sally? A lot of people.
As I say, 1.6 million this year. It's slightly better than it was 6 months ago because the rates are going in the right way. But a lot of people are having to rejig and rethink how they approach their mortgage. Brokers are really very, very busy advising, really trying to help. There are some tricks you can do. You can extend your mortgage term to try and bring that monthly payment down. People can look at interest only. You can stretch your fixed rate term to 5 years. You get better affordability. So it really is sort of playing the market, seeing what's out there. They're being quite innovative, lenders. They really are. A lot of people are scared to commit for a long time because there are penalties if you get out of your fixed rate early, and you want to do that if rates do change. So there are some products out there that are trying to address these issues. We're seeing innovation all the time, which is good. It needs a shake up.
It's interesting. This is turning into a sort of MP bashing phone-in. We were asking you about your mortgages. Please tell us about your mortgages. Tell us how it's affecting you. But I'll just do a couple of texts. If you ever needed proof that politicians are out of touch with the majority of the British public, look no further than poor old Tory Minister George Freeman. My heart bleeds for him. How did he ever manage on a salary of 118,000 a year? So on 118,000, after he's paid a 2 grand mortgage, the minister still has well over 4k to play with each month. I would imagine that's a problem the vast majority of this people in this country would be prepared to live with. I know people renting in London who barely have £400 to live on each month. Classic, out of touch, conservative. There's Andy in Derby saying that. But maybe, just to be charitable, he's making the point that, look, it's tough for me. So, I really am sympathetic to the vast majority of people in this country who are not on a handsome salary like I am. Jeremy, not real name in Sussex. Good morning, Jeremy. Tell us about the struggle.
Oh, good morning, Nicky, and thanks for having me on, and also for keeping this at the front of our attention, because it does slip out of the news. It's so important. We've got to keep talking about it, so thank you. But my situation, I've got my own home, and my mortgage is up for renewal very soon, and I'm just guessing at what it might be at the moment in trying to work out where the extra money is going to come from. In addition to having a landlord to 2 properties, and I've had to have those very, very difficult conversations with the tenants about how we're going to try and hold on to their home. And it's very, very difficult. And of course, in the past, there's been a small profit to be made from having these properties. But that said, lots of maintenance has to be done. So that eats into those profits. But at the moment, we've had to discuss how we're going to cope, and whether or not they can stay, and whether or not I could even hold on to the house in the first place. So it's been very, very difficult to work out what to do. And on top of that, I'm a commercial tenant, so I'm paying rent as well for my work premises. So no matter which way I turn, I'm facing these increases. And it's really at breaking point now. And we're just doing everything we can. Things are being cancelled, cancel holidays, cancel the treats, the coffees on the weekend, and the nice meals out, because all the money is just being plowed into not only retaining my own house, but also these additional properties which I've been renting out successfully for quite a few years. But of course now it's going to become quite difficult. And if I go back a few years, I looked at the paperwork, and 10 years ago, the rate that I had then is the same as what it is now. But back then, things weren't as expensive. The shopping wasn't so expensive. The fuel bills weren't so expensive. So I think that is, and it's taken me a while to get my head around why there is such a struggle at the moment. But I think everything else has just crept up. So whereas the mortgage might have been achievable at this higher rate, it's everything else which is unfortunately taken all the money before we even get to the mortgage. So it's been quite a challenge, I must say.
Yeah, so it's even more painful because of everything else, the financial backdrop, the whole financial picture. When you say that you're close to breaking point, what's breaking point? What does that mean?
I think breaking point is there's a mortgage up for renewal later this year, and it's on a rental property. And when in the summer, I'm hoping the rate is going to come down a bit, because at the moment, if it stays where it is, that property will have to go. It's not my fault. It's not the tenant's fault, but they will lose their home because the house is just completely financially unviable. It won't work. Even if it just breaks even and every penny of the rent coming in covers the mortgage going out, if a boiler breaks, £3,000. If something goes wrong in the house that costs any money, that just won't be there. And unfortunately, that buffer zone, and I don't think landlords should be made to feel guilty about a profit, as long as it's not a ridiculous one. But that any money on top of the rent that comes in and the mortgage going out that's left over, that does, in a majority of cases, get spent on maintaining the property. Yeah. So there won't be any money left to fix it. And of course, tenants are by right should have a comfortable home with a working boiler, safe and comfortable.
So what about? I get that it's painting the Forth Road Bridge, cliche alert, but yes, it is. So what about flogging a property? Might that be an option?
It would be, yes, absolutely. But of course, I might have 4 people without a home, and I can't make that decision yet because we've got no idea what the interest rate's going to do. So it would be quite a last minute, maybe 3 months. I'm sorry, you're going to have to go. I can't keep this house any longer. You've paid. You're offering to pay a bit more rent. I'm digging deep to chuck some more into the pot as well. But it just, unfortunately, it's not enough. The bank want more than any of us can afford. So breaking point will be a house gets sold. And of course, yes, okay, there might be a bit of equity in the house, but the tax man comes in. So if I were to sell a property, let's just say he's got £120,000 worth of equity in it, and that might be, in the future, that might be a pension pot for me, so I don't have another one. The taxman might want to take £40,000-50,000 of that. So the breaking point is the house gets sold, people lose their homes, massive tax bills get paid, and not a lot is left. So that's breaking point, really.
Yes. Jeremy, thank you. And not real name, but you're right. I think we were right at our editorial meeting to to go with this, and the fact that you appreciate that, and the fact you say that we mustn't let this slip off the radar, is right. So kudos to those who pressed for this as a second hour conversation. Claire in Earlswood in Surrey. Claire, what's happening with you? Good morning.
Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Loud and clear. It's beautiful.
Oh, good. Okay, lovely. So I messaged in because we've been watching the rates for about a year, sort of preparing ourselves financially for a rise in mortgage costs. But we've actually gone through just a complete mix of emotions. We've considered doing things on the house, and then we've actually considered not doing things on the house. Should we move? We've gone through, feeling upset, feeling angry, because actually when our mortgage comes up for renewal in May, it's £1,300 at the minute, and that's manageable because we've now got both children at school, and we're not having to pay childcare costs. But actually, when that mortgage comes up for renewal in May, we potentially have to give the bank an additional £800 a month, and that is not really affordable for us. And so we've gone through these, mix of emotions. Do we sell up? Do we move away? Do we then move the kids? Do we lose, all the other benefits that we have in our, lovely community? And you go through all these ranges of emotions, all because we've got to give the bank more money for nothing is actually what it comes down to, in our opinion.
Yeah, it's so depressing, isn't it? So worried, constant anxiety.
Yeah, it's you've either got to settle and be happy to pay that and just sacrifice other things. We're very lucky that the kids go to gymnastics and do other classes and swimming and stuff, but actually that might need to stop because that money might need to pay for us to have a roof over our head. So it's just scrimping a bit now to prepare for giving the bank more money for nothing in return. So it's frustrating. Definitely.
How do you feel about what has happened and why it's happened? Do you blame the politicians?
Wow. I don't really know if I blame the politicians as such. I do think it's good that the politicians come forward and said, "Look, I'm struggling."
Yeah.
Because actually, it probably makes them a bit more normal. And yes, the salary is very good, but there are a number of families out there that are on that salary that are struggling as well. It's not to say that all of those people who are with a lower income are struggling. It can affect other families, and
I think anyone with a mortgage would have looked to said, "Oh, look, what's happening here? Let me refix. Let me find another deal. Let me just. This is going to make a difference." But £800 a month more. What are you going to do?
Oh well. I work part-time at the minute, so I may need to look to go back full-time. We just need to be careful with that because, there are implications with childcare costs if you do that. So it's just weighing it up to work out whether or not that can benefit us. We need to run the freezer down more often. We need to make sure that we shop at slightly, less expensive supermarkets. Be more organised. We need to do meal plans. The kids might not be able to do swimming. We need to completely change our lives to be able to try and raise more money a month. If that means that we've got to get a second job, then we might need to do that. Until we know what that amount is going to be, it's quite difficult to plan. And because they're saying the rates are coming down, it's even more difficult because we want to hold off until that very last minute to get the best possible rate. But even that may still be a lot higher than what we're currently what we've got locked in.
Sally, do you want to come in here, because it's the uncertainty, isn't it? I mean, what is going to happen with the rates, and people just there are so many calculations being done on the back of so many metaphorical fag packets. Yeah,
absolutely, and we know how quickly situations can change. The situation in the Middle East. Any escalation with Ukraine could change all our best laid plans and feeling about what will happen. There is strong evidence, and I'm not an economist, so don't shoot me if this doesn't happen, that rates will start to come down in the second half of this year. They will not come down to the rates that we enjoyed a couple of years ago or even a year ago. That is fairly clear. So at best, we're looking at 2 or 3 reductions in the next 9 months, which will take us hopefully down to 3.75 potentially in 2025, beginning of 2025. So yes, we're going to see them come down, fingers crossed, but it will still mean, as Claire so rightly says, an increase. You just don't know how much it's going to be. I would say to Claire that if her rate is coming to an end in May, the best thing she could do at the moment in January is to secure the best rate on the market at the moment. And then she's got something in her back pocket if anything changes. And then she can change that rate and go for a lower one right up until just before it transfers over. So there are some things that you can do which it's not very, attractive, but it can make you feel a little bit more in control. Like you're actually the dog with the tail that's wagging, the tail is not wagging you. And that can make a huge difference psychologically, I think, because as Claire says, they're sitting there anxious, not knowing which way to turn or what to do for the best. So to take back some control, speak to a broker, see what's out there, see what your options are, can make a difference.
Okay, Mike in Milnthorpe, I'll try and come back to you, Claire, because you might have a comment on the comment, but a lot of people, and Mike in Milnthorpe, John in Lewis, Matt in Bourton-on-the-Water, and Martin in Coventry, to come to all of you. Mike, I know Milnthorpe, in-laws live there, beautiful. What's your situation, and what do you think about the fact that a man on 120k very nearly cannot afford his mortgage? How is it for you?
Well, to be honest, it's. I mean, we're in a lucky position, so I'm not. So it's been fairly clear that the mortgage rates were going to go up at some point. So we remortgaged in 2020, and we set our mortgage payment then as if we were paying 5%. So when we come to remortgage later on this year, at the moment, our mortgage will change by about £7. But if you look at Mr. Freeman, if his mortgage is going from 800 to 2,000, one, he must be only on an interest-only mortgage, so. Because the rates just haven't changed that much. At best they've doubled, and that you'd have a capital element and a repayment. And 2, it's kind of endemic of the whole government, isn't it? Failing to plan and just not looking ahead. And I appreciate everybody on income similar to mine and can struggle, and it will be going up. But it just frustrates me every time when you get an MP who's no doubt other houses' mortgages being paid on his expenses and everything.
Yeah, we don't know his personal circumstances, and people have complicated lives. But
for his rate to have changed that much, something's dramatically wrong, and it's probably because it's on interest only. So. Did he do an affordability check whenever he did it? Because they're not going up by £1,200, £200 or £300 on an £800 mortgage is all it would go up now if you're going from 1% to 4.5%.
I salute you, by the way. I salute you for your prescience. Wow.
It was just more peace of mind knowing that if at some point our mortgage payment's going to get higher. We've got 2 kids at uni, so at the minute our expenses are massively, are very high, and we just needed to be able to plan to know that we could afford any change when it came along. It was, it just made sense in my head.
Are you paying their accommodation as well,
luckily,
are they paying the tuition fees and accommodation?
No, we're having to pay, because they're both on minimum. Well, I mean, at the minute, one of them's in Malaysia. I mean, that's the other idiosyncrasy of the system. One of them's currently doing a year abroad in Malaysia, gets slightly higher loan than she would get in the UK, but her rent's £350 a term, not £165 a week. No, we're having to pay their rent because their loan barely covers their Well, it doesn't cover the rent. It doesn't cover the rent or living costs or anything because they get the minimum that's available, unfortunately. But so it's just one of those. But I guess it's about trying to afford the lifestyle we have or don't have.
This is it. It's lifestyle. Matt in Bourton on the Water. What's happened to your disposable income, Matt? Welcome. Morning.
Hi, Nicky. Morning. Yeah, it's shrunk quite considerably. We were quite fortunate. It's been really interesting listening to the range of callers that you've had. I mean, we capitalised in 2021 on favourable housing market conditions. We sold our house. We moved to a new area, got a good rate. So, had a decent rate we were paying, I don't know, about 2.5%. And then everything with the economy has happened. All of these events around the world have happened. So our mortgage rate now is at 5.5%. And in real terms, that means an increase in about £600 a month to our mortgage.
Sure. How are you going to cover it? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's not just mortgage rates that have changed and are causing cost increases. Your expert has talked there about the wars and volatility and other costs that are going up, energy, food. So it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. You find one cost to reduce, and that might be all scrimp on our weekly food shop, and then up pops another cost. It's tricky. We've got cars on finance, and we're in quite a fortunate position. It's not all woe betide me, but we're looking at those cars and whether or not we can afford to keep them both or keep one or whatever. So we're having to. Really, like many of your callers, we're kind of riding this roller coaster of emotions and then trying to work out what we do to ensure that we can stay in our house, basically.
Yeah, the thing about this conversation is it's not about, oh, look at you, you've got two cars. Oh, look at you, you rent out houses, you're a landlord. It's about a relative shift in everybody's lifestyle. That's what this is about. And George Freeman, some more stuff on him. And he told this is the MP who's on 118 plus K a year, who says he's struggling with his mortgage. Individual circumstances, everybody's different. He says his finances are not what they were, having gone through a very painful divorce, parents both getting elderly. It's time to prioritise the things that I feel rather painfully personally I've had to neglect. As my second wife said the other day, I'm not 26, 36, 46, I'm 56, nearly 57, 3 stone overweight, 30 years poorer. 30 years poorer, there's a thing. And what's the PJ line about divorce? Next time I'm going to miss out the middle bit, just find someone I hate and buy them a house. So this, and it said, he said he would stand for re-election at the next general election this year, but said it looks very likely that we're going to have a Labour government. So that will go down like a bag of whatever with Downing Street. But he's always been a bit of a free spirit and free thinker, has George Freeman. I was a great admiration for him, interviewing him over the years. There's a text here on it. Your speaker's just said the minister who's resigned is in a privileged position based on his salary. In what way is he privileged? He's been voted in by his local electorate, could easily be redundant after the next election. Additionally, no one knows his financial situation. Does he have 2 homes? One in his constituency, one in London? What's his partner's situation? Without these details, you're just creating ill-informed gossip. That's Pete in Cheshire. Let's go with John in Lewis. Hello, John. How are things? Morning, John. Go on.
Thank you for covering this subject, because I think it's been an area which has been completely neglected in recent months. In a nutshell, very simple situation. My son is 44. He has a small 1-bedroom flat, which he's had for many, many years. He works in the healthcare sector. He's lost 3 jobs in the last 12 months, including one with the NHS. And each time he loses a job, his new job pays less than the one before. Now, as far as his mortgage is concerned, that's increased. And at the same time, of course, with less income and the cost of living crisis, he finds himself now in a very difficult financial situation. He can't remortgage because of the circumstances he's in. My wife and I did equity release, Bank of Mum and Dad, to help our kids. And my wife has died, so I'm now using the funds that we raised to keep him afloat. If he was to sell the flat, he would have to then pay more in rent than he's actually paying on his mortgage. So there's no easy solution for that either. And his view is that he's done everything right. He's gone to university, got master's degrees and so on, and it hasn't worked for him. And he doesn't see that it's been rewarded, and he doesn't see any hope for the future. And as far as the interest rates are concerned, without getting into the political situation, which I wouldn't dream of commenting on because I might get taken off air, of course, all the interest rate rises were irrelevant because inflation was always going, if you ask any sensible economist, inflation was always eventually going to come down by some measure. It will never return to where it was, but other factors were beyond our control. So it's a perfect storm, Nicky.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Measured, considered contributions from all. Thank you so much. And some painful situations, whether you're an MP on 118,000 or somebody who's had their disposable income completely wiped out like Matt, or somebody like John there who's keeping his son afloat, bank of mum and dad, or someone like Jeremy struggling with his own mortgage, a landlord to 2 homes as well, who's having a nightmare, or Claire, due to remortgage this year, facing an £800 increase. What's it like for you at the moment? Get in touch. 10:34.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
And here's the news from Nick Hatfield.
Thank you, Nicky. Good morning. There are hopes power sharing in Northern Ireland could be back up and running within days. The DUP, which has been boycotting the Stormont Assembly over post-Brexit trading issues, says it's ready to agree to a deal put forward by the government at Westminster if conditions are met. A man has died after being shot by police in southeast London. Scotland Yard says officers were called to reports of a man trying to force his way into a property in Southwark. It's reported he was armed with weapons, including a crossbow, and was threatening to harm people. The former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been given a 10-year jail term over accusations he leaked state secrets. The ex-cricketer, who's already in prison for corruption, has called the charges against him politically motivated. And HSBC has been fined more than £57 million by the Bank of England for failing to do enough to protect customers' money. The bank's accused of serious failings between 2015 and 2022. The sport now with Katie Smith.
Former Manchester United defender Gary Neville's told the BBC that Marcus Rashford needs to consider his choices and his timing. United say the forward's taken responsibility for his actions in an internal disciplinary matter which is now closed. The issue revolves around reported nights out in Belfast last week and calling in sick for training afterwards. Neville says Rashford is an experienced player now, but he's done it a couple of times in the past few months. Crystal Palace have signed Colombia right-back Daniel Munoz from Belgian side Genk. It's on a 3-year deal worth £6.8 million with a further year option. Palace are hosting Sheffield United tonight in the Premier League. It's one of 5 games which you can hear across radio and BBC Online. Our 5 Live commentary from 7:30 is Nottingham Forest hosting Arsenal. Meanwhile, Arsenal's women have signed France goalkeeper Sarah Bouhaddi on a short-term deal. She won 8 Champions League titles with Lyon before joining PSG 2 years ago. And England fly-half Marcus Smith is awaiting scam results on a leg injury. He limped out of training yesterday with their Six Nations opener against Italy on Saturday. Coach Richard Wigglesworth said it would definitely be a blow for us if he's unavailable.
This remains one of the toughest processes around.
On BBC iPlayer,
I need you to create a virtual escape room.
The Apprentice is back.
So excited to be here in Budapest.
I want you to launch a new Formula E team.
Every second counts!
You lost me money.
Sorry, guys. Shush. Just tell the truth.
You've been using crumble. The fish cake.
You kidding?
The Apprentice.
You're fired.
Starts Thursday on BBC iPlayer.
BBC Radio 5 Live.
The voice of the UK.
Nicky Campbell.
Listen live, pause, rewind and discover with the BBC Sounds app.
We're talking mortgages, and it's off the back of the story that George Freeman, the Conservative MP, says he's finding it really difficult to pay his at the moment because it's gone up from 800 to 2,000, and he's got complicated life circumstances, as I itemised just a few moments ago. Sally Mitchell with us, mortgage advisor and broker. Coming up, we've got Emily in Deddington and John in Pocklington, and Martin in Coventry. I think you want to make a political point, Martin. You're entitled to do. You are entitled to do that. What might it be?
Good morning, Nicky. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that everybody's mortgages are not going up. I'm actually one of the lucky ones that I'm nearing the end of my mortgage on a fixed rate from a few years ago, so I'm very, very lucky. Mind saying that cost of living is affecting us in other ways. The point is the reporting of this fact that George Freeman is giving up £40,000 because he can't afford a £2,000 mortgage or an increase. Why on earth would you give up £40,000 of income because you can't afford something? And the point is that has been reported, I've seen earlier today, that it's because he can actually get a more lucrative second job because he's not a minister. And, that's not being reported very much, as far as I can see. The only headline is he's giving up £40,000 because he can't afford it.
You're right. Really when I read it on the way in this morning, that was my immediate inference was, okay, so he's going to be freer to actually make more. He doesn't make the point that he doesn't think he's going to be re-elected, or he doesn't think his government's going to be re-elected.
He doesn't need to, though, does he, Nicky? He doesn't need to be re-elected. He will be on boards here and there, everywhere, making £5,000 a day or whatever because of his previous positions. And I mean, several times I've sort of texted into your shows and other shows about second and third jobs for MPs. I don't think it's right. Everybody's got the right to have second and third jobs. If you're supposed to be a public servant, then that's how it should be. You've had a life before, there's a life afterwards. Then just do what you're paid for, which is looking after us.
And you get a decent pension. So maybe they should get paid more.
Yeah, I advocate. My advocate is pay more, and regardless of all the second home malarkey as well, stick them in a purpose-built enclave down in Westminster somewhere, and it takes out all the second home expenses, and that's another thing that all the expenses that they get.
Like a barge on the Thames or something like that.
Definitely a barge right next to Westminster, yeah, absolutely perfect. Yeah, there for you. That'll go down well, wouldn't it?
Good stuff, thank you. Emily in Deddington, John in Pocklington, and Joe in Haywards Heath. Let's go with Joe first off. What do you think about this?
Yes, well, I just texted in because we are obviously struggling as everyone is, but we've got two mortgages. One went up last year by about 400 because it's on a tracker, so it's 0.5 above the base rate, so gone up to about nearly 6%. The other half is a fixed rate that we have for 2 years that we need to remortgage in April, and that's probably going to increase another 400. And trying to even cut back on outgoings when we're already, we don't have many luxuries, we don't have a high disposable income. We do fairly well. We've got decent jobs. We've got two small kids. Very low mortgage is like 200k. So now it's like we're thinking, how do we cut back? And it's down to food bills and kids clubs. And my daughter loves Stagecoach on Saturday morning. She might not be able to go to that. And then if it's, I don't know how long it will continue, but then we need to think about moving. So it just seems crazy in the times that we live in that we just can't afford to live.
Can I ask your combined income? Can I be nosy?
Yeah, I think it's just under 120k.
All right. So round about the same as Mr. Freeman. And he's struggling. Yeah. And
I'm head of buying for a global fashion brand. Paid fairly decently. I went full time back in because I've got two small children. I went full time a few years ago when my husband lost his job. He ran the picture desk for a big company called Shutterstock, but that industry is shrinking with everything going automated and digitalised. So he had to retrain and go back to college. So he's now working locally. We live in Sussex, so he works for National Trust now doing sort of ranger job, which he loves, but obviously doesn't pay, very well. So, yes, but for what we bring in, it is crazy that, and considering our mortgage is so low as well, it seems crazy that we're really, struggling to live. And thinking we may not afford a holiday this year, and the kids can't do the things they love, like it's Stagecoach, and the small things that it's not even the big luxuries and expensive holidays. It's just living.
This is what we were saying, Sally. It's just, some people ostensibly very well off, but everyone's lifestyle is notching down a couple of notches, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And we can't forget also people who are trying to get on the property ladder. That's a whole different demographic. With these increased rates and affordability tests, people are finding it even harder to get out of renting and get their first home, which is something in Britain that we really like to do. The Englishman's home is his castle, and people really strive to own their own property, and it's getting harder and harder.
Mm-hmm. And why would, one of my daughters would say, why do you move out? Why should she, I can see it from her point of view, she's got a job, but why should she take a massive slice of her salary? She gives us a bit, but it's, renting in London. Wow.
Oh, so difficult. As Jeremy was saying, a landlord, his rates have gone up, his mortgage payments. Now, most landlords at some point have to pass that on to the tenant. So tenants get hit, really badly. And if you're paying rent, it's impossible to save, to get your down payment, to get onto the property ladder. So, it's really, really hard for generation rent and for, people who are in the private rental sector.
Thank you so much.
And if you're not in the
for
private
that.
sector, then, there's not enough housing stock. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Joe, thank you. That was a really instructive call. And here's a text. Poor homeowners. No, I'm performing it for you here. My heart bleeds. Not. Maybe Mr. Freeman and all his peers should try to rent and see what it means to struggle. Our landlord put up the rent from 2,400 ! To 3,600 for an old, small 3-bed house. Still, we have to live with a much lower income with no prospect of ever owning a house. I have no sympathy for homeowners complaining about mortgages. That is from Pat in West London. John in Pocklington, welcome. What would you like to say?
Morning, Nicky. Basically, I've lived long enough to actually see this cycle through previously in the 1990s. I moved down from Scotland to get work because couldn't get a job up in Scotland at the time, late 80s, early 90s. I arrived in Kent in Maidstone to find most of my peers owning houses, buying and selling a house every year, making a profit, moving on, not necessarily banking the profit and putting it into the next mortgage, but actually selling a house, spending, having nice holidays, etc., which was a bit of an eye-opener for me because that had not been the case in Edinburgh and Glasgow where I've been working. And then the crash happened and suddenly they were handing keys back and living in negative equity for 10 years and so on and so forth. So my point in general is that if you buy a house, you take a risk and, events turn, always do. Prices rise, prices fall. Economics is cyclical. We all know that. But the biggest difficulty is that houses have become a commodity in my lifetime. And they're no longer a home. And so I find myself in a situation where I'm looking at people buying houses that they simply shouldn't be affording, Help to Buy just encouraged house prices to go even further than they already were. And if you're in Pocklington, there are houses here that sell to young couples with, little kids, and they're at 350, 400, 500,000 pounds a pop. And you're thinking, how the hell are you going to pay for this if anything goes wrong? If as has happened, a war breaks out, or we have a cost of living crisis because of oil prices, etc. It's a bit of a sort of reminder to us all that you should try very hard to think about what you can and can't afford and how you're going to.
Exactly. We just lost the end of it. But John was on one and making a lot of sense there. Joe in Tamworth. Hi, Joe. Welcome. Good morning.
Hello. Yeah, morning.
Morning. So, what would you like to say?
Well, I've been listening to your show briefly this morning, and I've been trying to get onto the so-called property ladder for a good 7 years, I'd say. My situation is a little bit unique in that I already live in the property that I want to buy off the council through the Right to Buy scheme, and my biggest gripe is that I'm paying considerably more in rent at the moment than I would be if I was to get a mortgage, which would save me about £250 a month at least. And I'm on a much lower income than the minister that you've been talking about this morning. So I've found it really difficult, and I don't understand some of the logics behind the way that lenders underwrite mortgage applications, because I've been facing barrier after barrier after barrier to getting onto and the property that I want to buy is already going to have 70% equity in the property as soon as the mortgage completes, because of the size of the discount that I'm due to get off the council through the scheme. And I've just been given another agreement in principle through another bank now, as I'm going through a mortgage broker. But yet again, I'm seeing from the correspondence that they're sending to me that there are potential pitfalls in the application, because they're asking me to provide a P60. So they want to check my previous tax contributions, which has been one of the areas that I've fallen down on before. So, yeah, I'm just finding the whole process really frustrating.
Yeah, come in here, Sally.
Yes, absolutely. It can be terribly frustrating, and I do feel for you, Joe. Basically, when lenders are lending, they take into account risk. Now, with something like a right to buy, there is more risk involved, or perceived risk for them, so they are often tighter on what they require from you. It is quite normal to ask for proof of income, including P60s going back 1 or even 2, 3 years, just to be absolutely doubly sure that they believe you will be able to afford the agreement, a mortgage loan. So it is quite normal. It's quite a specialist niche type of mortgage for right to buy. So you will come up against a few more hurdles.
Can
and
I
it does
just
seem
make a
very
quick
unfair.
comment? Yeah, my comment to that is, and I totally understand that, when the mortgage lenders and the banks started struggling in 2008, we all felt that. So I don't want the banks to start struggling again. But what I would say to that is, I've lived in this property paying rent considerably more than the mortgage would be if I was to get it for the last 15 years. So if that's not evidence of my ability to honour a mortgage that's going to be £250 less per month, then I don't really understand what is.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel. And actually, one lender has taken that idea and developed it into a product now, where if you have paid rent consistently for 18 months at least, and you can prove that track record, they will consider you for a mortgage. They will take those payments as evidence that you are capable and willing to pay a mortgage payment. So that is a niche product it's not for right to buy, unfortunately, but it is something that's just been released recently. And it's totally unfair. I get it. They don't look at the individual. They look at like a risk assessment over thousands and thousands of applicants, and it's not fair. They talk about common sense lending a lot, and quite often it doesn't actually follow through. I think there needs to be a bit of a shake-up of the way that people are judged in applications.
Yeah,
definitely.
Agreed.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Emily in Deddington. Good morning, Emily.
Hi, good morning.
How are you coping?
I'm doing okay. So it's sort of in line with your other speakers that my husband and I don't actually have a mortgage. We live in an area that is quite well known for being reasonably affluent. The houses around us are very, very expensive, and people want to live in this area. So a lot of new builds are going up in the area, but some, even the ones that are classed as affordable, aren't actually affordable. Like they might start at 300,000, 350,000, and I'm not entirely sure who that's aimed at. That's not the average person's sort of affordability. But also, my husband and I are both self-employed, and I have a couple of children's books, and it's, that alone, getting a mortgage because we're both self-employed, we would be seen as a high risk. Just because we are self-employed, we could, all of a sudden lose all of our work in theory. All that's never happened, but, to the banks, to the mortgage companies, it could happen. So we'd be seen as more of a risk. But actually getting onto the housing market is sort of almost an impossibility where we live, because everything is just so expensive. And just due to our jobs, it's sort of like almost like a pipe dream, really, which is a real shame, because we both grew up in this area, and at the sort of how things currently stand, we'd either have to move way down south or way up north to find something that's actually affordable for us, which is a bit of a shame, really.
Way down south where? Because if you're talking way down south Bath, not a chance. Way down south
No, sort of maybe sort of around Somerset or, places like that, where housing prices are sort of a little more affordable. In specific areas, obviously, there are specific pockets which are very expensive anywhere, but there are also sort of more pockets, sort of almost sort of the further you go from sort of London or sort of those other pockets of cities and things.
Yeah, Somerset itself, like round, I don't know, places like Wedmore, property prices would be higher than in other parts of Somerset, for example. So it's
yes, there are pockets everywhere.
Yeah. Pockets everywhere. Yeah.
So it's just one of those battles. Luckily, we are in obviously a very fortunate situation where we are in a rental property. We've been in this property for 8 years. Our landlords are really nice. It's a private rental. So we know that we are in a position where we're really lucky because, with housing prices everywhere going up, private rental landlords have been selling their properties, to pay for their higher mortgages and things like that. And so we are in a position where our house hasn't been sold and we are actually in it, and we have been for a long time. So we do appreciate that we're in a fortunate position. But if we wanted to ever move to, get on the housing market, I don't know if that would even be a possibility for us, because we're both self-employed, and the banks, or mortgage companies don't take into account. It was just mentioned that there is sort of one company who is doing it, but they don't take into account your rental, payments. So we've never ever missed a payment, even during lockdown when we lost all of our work. We were required to go into people's homes, and so we lost almost all of our work, but we never missed a payment. And sort of, companies don't tend to take that into account when they're looking for, when they're looking to give you a mortgage, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah. Self-employed, interesting. I'm going to hold that thought. That's a very important call. Thank you, Emily, because I'm going to go to Fiona in Hull, also self-employed. What can you tell us this morning, Fiona?
Right. First of all, I don't have a mortgage. I couldn't afford one. But self-employed, all you're working for is this government, the financial system. I was saying that 30% of our takings go to Just Eat, 20% go to VAT, 20% goes to the tax. Then you've got all your supplies and you've got your staff and everything. So actually, you're working for nothing. I've worked 40 years in the catering, and it's disgusting. All these banks are doing, they're the robbers in this country. And people should say, no more. The banks are built on our money. We don't get it back, though, do we, on interest to us? And people will have no savings anymore. It's just disgusting. It's unaffordable. And if you work, one lady was saying how much they earn a year, right? But the government wants it, the banks want it, and you're ending up with nothing. It's just disgusting. And the electric, the gas is as much as a mortgage. And the hard-working people of this country are suffering now because mentally it's making you ill. So your quality of life in this country is shocking.
Are you feeling it in your own mental health there?
Everybody is, yeah. Because you've worked hard all your life, but you're not working. Self-employed people aren't working for themselves. They're providing everybody else except themselves. And it's just disgusting.
What was COVID like for you as a self-employed person?
Come out and say, we'll look to help people. We don't want help. We want to work. We've earned it. We've invested in it. It's ours. And all you want to do is take it.
Can I ask you?
People in this country should be like in France. No more. Stand together and say absolutely not.
Get on your tractors. Listen,
bankers,
let me ask you, a self-employed person on the back of... Can you hear me?
On the backs of us.
Can you hear me?
Sorry.
I want to ask you a question. No. Listen, it's all yours, because I'm hearing this this flow of anger, and that's good. But what was COVID like for you as a self-employed person?
Okay, so COVID, that was a rip-off. Now then, so when it was COVID, we had to open, even though the high risk to us. So you adapted your business at a cost, forced to work because you wouldn't have got nothing. And because restaurants and things like that were closed, takeaways were busier. They reduced the VAT to 5%. But what they didn't tell you was, because of that, the profits would have been more. So you went into a 40% tax bracket. So what they gave you, they took back and more. So you ended up with a vast amount of tax to pay. Yeah? So they didn't lose out. We did. Do you get what I mean? So instead of being 20% VAT and on a 20% tax bracket, you still had to pay more anyway.
What do you make of this MP then, who can't pay his mortgage?
Well, actually, no. There was a lady on earlier, and she said she earns about 120,000 a year, and she can't afford it. Well, yeah, maybe not, right? Because of his outgoings, because of him being ripped off by his mortgage company or the banks, and him being ripped off like the rest of us. You know, it depends. The affordability, but you know, when you don't get benefits and things like that, and you're working hard regardless of whatever you've got should be yours.
Listen, I hope that we talk again. I've enjoyed listening to you. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the phone-in this morning. More tomorrow.
The voice of the UK. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.